Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Grayson Devereaux returned to his secluded lakefront property, he expected fallen branches, not a luxury fishing lodge built by a rogue HOA on his land. What began as a trespass turned into a legal war against entitlement, deception, and the fury of one determined landowner. When I pulled off the gravel county road and made the final turn onto the private access path leading to my lakefront property, I expected the usual. Overgrown brush, maybe a few fallen branches, the kind of things that pile up when you leave one. 180 acres alone for a couple of weeks. What I did not expect, what I couldn't have expected, was to see half a dozen freshly cut tree stumps, tire tracks from heavy equipment, and a damn fishing lodge sitting on the western bank of my private lake. I stopped the truck so fast I nearly bit the steering wheel. Right where my grandfather's old canoe used to rest under the trees, now stood a cedar-sided structure with a metal roof, patio deck, a boat dock jutting into the water, and a garish wooden sign that read, Silver Pines Lakefront Fishing Lodge, private access for HOA members only. There were barbecue grills, fire pits, Adirondack chairs, even a vault toilet tucked into the trees, complete with a solar light above the door. It looked like a damn brochure photo for a mountain resort, except it was on my land. My land. This lake, this shoreline, it's been in my family since the Kennedy administration. My grandfather purchased it from the State Forestry Commission back in the 60s, and every square inch, including the full riparian easement around the lake, was deeded, surveyed, and taxed under the Devereaux name for generations. So, how the hell did an HOA I'd barely heard of think they could drop a fishing lodge onto it like they were building Sims houses? I drove slowly toward the structure, my knuckles tightening on the wheel. Two guys in neon vests and tool belts were anchoring a bench to the deck and barely glanced up. One of them, older, with a silver beard and mirrored sunglasses, gave me a nod like I was a delivery driver. "Morning," he said. "You with the HOA too?" I killed the engine, stepped out, and asked without smiling, "Which HOA would that be?" "Silver Pines," he replied, brushing sawdust off his shirt. "We were told this was a community access lodge for member use. Got the plans last month. Fast track build. Permits handled by the board. You folks do a good job organizing this stuff." "I don't live in Silver Pines," I said flatly. "This is my property. You're standing on my land, and you just admitted to building an unauthorized structure on it." The other guy froze mid-drill. Silverbeard chuckled, clearly thinking I was joking. "Sure, buddy." That's what the last guy said too, until the board showed him the paperwork. Said this shoreline was shared use back in the day. Some informal understanding. Maybe check with your HOA rep? I pulled out my phone and started recording. Do I look like someone who needs an HOA rep to access his own damn lake? He blinked. "Don't worry," I added, angling my phone toward the sign and the structure. "You're going to want to remember this conversation when the sheriff asks who gave you permission." He muttered something about just doing the job and walked off toward a black SUV parked near the edge of the clearing. I stayed exactly where I was, scanning the scene. There were solar-powered security cameras mounted to the side of the building, their cameras, watching my lake. I followed the gravel that curved behind the lodge and saw a stack of HOA-branded folding chairs still in their packaging and boxes labeled event supplies. I called the county sheriff's office right then and there. While I waited, I pulled a weatherproof map tube from my glove compartment and retrieved the most recent printout of my property survey, complete with GPS coordinates, lot overlays, and historic easement lines. Then I called my land attorney, David Lazenby, and told him to prepare for incoming hell. 35 minutes later, a cruiser rolled up. Deputy Rubin stepped out, a guy I'd met once before at a farm supply fundraiser. He gave me a curious look. "Mr. Devereaux," dispatch said trespassing complaint. "What's going on?" I pointed silently at the lodge, then at the sign. His eyebrows went up. "Wait, this wasn't here last month." "No," I said, "because I don't recall granting a permit to a suburban HOA to clear forest and install a goddamn fishing lodge on my deeded shoreline." Rubin looked genuinely thrown. "Silver Pines, huh? They said they had permission?" "Let me guess. They claimed some kind of oral agreement with a former owner." He nodded slowly. "Which is cute," I said, unfolding the survey and walking him through the lines. "Because I'm the owner, the only owner. No subdivision, no joint access. And this," I pointed at the structure again, "is about as legal as a backyard meth lab." He sighed, rubbing his neck. This might need to go to the zoning department. Already called my attorney. This is heading straight to court, but before that, I want names. Who authorized this? Who signed the contractor orders? And which brilliant mind thought a community lodge sounded like something you just plopped down on a stranger's land? Reuben nodded and began taking photos and names. The contractors were cooperative enough. After realizing this wasn't just a mix-up, I made sure to get their statements on video too, noting that they were told this land was open for improvement by HOA members and that the board had cleared it. The sun was already low when Reuben left to file the initial report, and I stayed behind, pacing the gravel path between my truck and the lodge. A part of me hoped this was all just a bureaucratic mistake, that some overzealous HOA board member misread a map and sent in a crew by accident. But deep down, I already knew this had Karen written all over it. And if she thought this was going to be a friendly little neighborly disagreement, she had another thing coming. The next morning, I was up before sunrise, thermos in hand, standing at the edge of the gravel clearing, staring at the unauthorized monstrosity squatting on my lakeshore like it belonged there. I'd barely slept. Not out of fear. I've worked salvage in the North Pacific. I don't lose sleep over HOA Karens. But out of sheer disbelief, the gall, the stupidity. I called in a favor from an old contact, Dean Mercer, licensed surveyor and GPS technician. We'd worked together a few times before when I was helping rebuild maritime retaining walls after flooding. He was the best kind of nerd, obsessive, fast, and allergic to bureaucratic nonsense. By 8:30, his SUV rolled up, equipment cases rattling in the back, and a drone rig already warming up. While Dean got to work re-verifying the parcel lines using GPS markers, satellite overlays, and LiDAR scans, I sat at my porch table sifting through boxes of family paperwork, deeds from the 1960s, updated plats from the 1990s, conservation filings, even a laminated letter from the State Water Board confirming my sole riparian rights. Around 10, a white luxury sedan rolled onto the property like it owned the place. I didn't need to see the plates to know who was behind the wheel. Karen Laurel emerged like she was walking onto a stage, expensive blouse, clipboard in hand, and sunglasses that screamed, manager of nothing but self-importance. 2 HOA board members stepped out behind her like backup singers. Mr. Devereaux, she called as if we were in a boardroom. We're here to clarify some confusion. There's no confusion, I said. You trespassed, vandalized, and built a goddamn lodge on private property. What part of that requires clarification? Karen gave a patronizing smile and flipped open her clipboard. Silver Pines has long maintained that this lakeshore was historically shared with our community. It's been accessed for decades. Local kids have fished here. Residents use the trails. Yeah, I cut in. Illegally, which makes it trespassing. You don't retroactively earn rights because people have been disrespectful for a long time. She tilted her head like I was a misbehaving child. Look, I understand you're upset, but we've already committed resources, labor, and community funding to improve the site. The lodge is for peaceful recreation. I laughed. You built a structure on my land. There's nothing peaceful about what's coming next. That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed behind those sunglasses. We have documentation, she said. Our maps show the lodge area as shared green space. Then your maps are fiction. My surveyor's here right now. Would you like to watch a professional show you exactly how wrong you are? Dean had overheard the exchange, and to his credit, didn't bother sugarcoating. He walked up with a rugged tablet and pulled up a live satellite overlay. Here's the recorded boundary from the county assessor, he said. Now here's the current GPS plot. The structure is 31 feet inside Mr. Devereaux's property. The entire build site is on his private parcel. Karen made a sound between a cough and a scoff. That can't be right. Dean zoomed in on the screen and pointed. Right there. This is your lodge. See this faint pink line? That's the legal boundary. You're well inside it. One of her board members leaned over to look, paled a bit, and muttered something that sounded like, "Oh, damn." Karen, still clutching her clipboard like it could shield her from legal consequences, straightened up. Well, this doesn't change the fact that our community has used this land for decades. There's a doctrine of customary use and implied easement. We'll be filing a petition. There's no implied easement here, I said. No documented access. No deeded right-of-way. The state confirmed that decades ago. And there's no doctrine that says you get to build toilets on private land because your neighbor once walked his dog too far. Karen's tone turned sharp. We'll see about that. I didn't flinch. We already are seeing about it. Police reports filed. Legal complaints in progress. You'll be hearing from my attorney today. Her mask slipped for just a second, a tiny flinch at the word attorney. Then she turned without another word and stalked back to her car, her board members trailing behind her like retreating interns. Dean exhaled and muttered, "People like her don't even read their own property lines, huh? People like her don't believe rules apply to them at all." I thanked Dean, paid him in full with a generous tip, and forwarded his survey results to my lawyer. By noon, David had already drafted a formal cease and desist letter and filed a notice of intent to sue for encroachment and unpermitted development. But the HOA wasn't done yet. That evening, I received a certified envelope via courier, a formal notice from Silver Pine's legal team accusing me of obstructing a community asset and threatening to pursue damages unless I allowed unfettered member access to the shoreline. They had the audacity to cite community morale and tradition as legal arguments. I made a second pot of coffee, scanned every page, and emailed the entire thing to David with a subject line that just read, "They're actually doing this." Then I pulled up my county's building permits portal and ran a search on the lodge's coordinates. Unsurprisingly, there was no record, no zoning variance, no environmental assessment, nothing. I smiled. Let them come. I had documents. I had survey data. I had history. And now I had a full legal warhead locked, loaded, and pointed straight at Silver Pines. By Friday morning, things had gone from ridiculous to outright hostile. My phone buzzed nonstop with notification pings. At first, I thought maybe it was my lawyer following up on the filings. But no, it was far worse. Someone had created a Facebook group titled Stop Lake Gate, Reclaim Public Nature, and apparently it had gone viral inside Silver Pines. A well-cropped photo of the lodge was pinned to the top, captioned, "Long-time shared resource stolen by selfish landowner. Help us stop environmental hoarding." Below that was a post by none other than Karen Laurel herself, now styling herself as a community advocate. She claimed I had barricaded access to a treasured historical recreation site, was threatening legal violence against neighbors, and, my favorite, had likely forged old documents to lay false claim to common land. The post had over 200 likes, 50 shares, and dozens of comments from HOA residents who, based on their grammar alone, probably believed that HOA meant high ownership authority. People talked about organizing community paddle-ins, protests, even contacting local news. And then it got real. That afternoon, while I was reviewing some updated filings with my lawyer, my motion sensor alert pinged. I opened the camera feed and just stared. 3 men in fishing gear were dragging a canoe across my driveway. There were already 2 pop-up tents set up at the water's edge, coolers, lawn chairs, a Bluetooth speaker pumping out classic rock. Someone had even installed a folding table with a camp stove. It looked like a tailgate party on the banks of my lake. I grabbed my phone and marched down with my GoPro rolling on my chest mount. I stayed calm, no yelling, no threats, just walked straight up to the makeshift camp like I was walking into a stranger's backyard. Because I was. "Hey there," I said, stopping just short of the fire pit they dug near the shore. "What are we doing out here today, gentlemen?" One of them looked up from cleaning a fish. "Just enjoying the lake, man. This lake happens to be on private property." "Nah," another one said, not even glancing at me. Karen said this was part of the HOA Greenbelt, said it was all being reclaimed. I took a breath. "You're trespassing, and before you say anything else, you're being recorded, and this land is legally owned by me. The lodge you see behind you is the subject of a criminal complaint. I suggest you leave peacefully." The third man, stockier than the others and already drunk at 2 p.m., stood up slowly and puffed his chest. "You threatening us?" "No," I said. "I'm giving you a lawful warning." He stepped closer. "This ain't your land. You think you can bully people off public land? You're the one breaking the law, man, blocking nature." He jabbed a finger at my chest, pushing slightly. I didn't say a word. I stepped back, calmly pulled out my phone, and dialed the sheriff again. Then, when he moved forward again, this time grabbing at my wrist, I reacted. Fast. I twisted his arm, redirected the momentum, and gently but firmly put him face down in the dirt. Nothing fancy, No extra force, just enough to stop him from swinging. He cursed and flailed, but he wasn't getting up until I let him. You good? I asked the other two, who had gone very still. Dude, one said. We didn't know. Karen said, yeah, I get it. Karen says a lot of things. 10 minutes later, a deputy arrived. Same guy from before, Reuben. His expression when he saw me holding down a grown man like a misbehaving teenager was priceless. Everything okay here? He swung at me. I restrained him. I have footage. They're trespassing. Again. Reuben sighed. Anyone else feel like this is going to be my new part-time job? He helped me separate the situation without incident. The drunk guy was cited for assault and trespassing. The other two were warned and let go. I chose not to press charges, for now. Reuben promised he'd escalate the complaint and personally flag my property in their system as disputed active investigation. That night, someone spray-painted the words "selfish prick" across my mailbox. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I installed motion-activated floodlights, doubled up my security cameras, set geofencing alerts around the shoreline, and bolted a thick steel lockbox onto my front gate post containing laminated copies of my deed, survey results, cease and desist, letter, and the original purchase documents from 1964. The next morning, HOA members returned, not with fishing rods this time, but with picket signs. Stop the lake lockdown. We pay HOA dues. We deserve access. No fascists on our shore. It was surreal. They stood on the edge of the tree line on their side of the property, not daring to cross. Yet, one guy had a megaphone and started chanting something about freedom of recreation. I stood on my porch, sipped my coffee, and called my lawyer again. David's response was almost chipper. They're digging their own legal graves, Grayson. Let them keep going. I didn't respond right away. I just watched the protesters waving their signs, saw a teenage kid kick over one of my posted notices, and wondered how far this thing was really going to go, because I had a feeling we hadn't hit bottom yet. Monday morning, I walked into the office of David Lazenby with a stack of printed screenshots, USB flash drive full of footage, and a folder of signed witness statements. His paralegal raised an eyebrow when I dropped everything onto the counter with a dull thunk. "Do I want to ask?" she said. Karen declared psychological warfare. I said, "This is my counterstrike." David was waiting for me in the conference room, flipping through HOA bylaws from Silver Pines that someone had leaked to us anonymously over the weekend. According to their own charter, HOA funds were to be used strictly within defined community boundaries. So naturally, Karen had gone and spent tens of thousands of dollars building a fishing lodge on land they didn't own. It was right there in the budget filings. Lakefront Improvement Initiative, $28,650 allocated for Q2. That number was about to cost them a hell of a lot more. By noon, David had filed a 3-part civil suit in county court. 1. Unlawful construction and encroachment on private land. 2. Environmental degradation and unauthorized deforestation in a riparian buffer zone. 3. Criminal trespass and malicious interference with private property rights. We also filed a separate complaint with the Washington State Department of Ecology, complete with drone footage and photographs Dean had taken showing the tree stumps, the shoreline alteration, and the gravel surface dumped right to the water's edge. But that wasn't all. We submitted an official report to the county assessor and tax office, flagging Silver Pines for potential misappropriation of member dues and HOA budget abuse. David made it clear in the letter that funds had been spent outside of the HOA's jurisdiction on private land, under the direction of a president who is now under active police investigation for trespassing and fraud. I wasn't just fighting to get a building removed. I was now going to war to dismantle the machinery that had allowed it to happen. That same afternoon, I installed a bright orange construction-grade barricade gate at the only access trail leading from Silver Pines into my forested boundary. Steel posts, cement footings, and a keypad lock. Next to it, a 6-foot sign. Private easement. No community access trespassers will be recorded, reported, and prosecuted. Then I added a little QR code in the corner that linked directly to a PDF of the lawsuit. By Wednesday, the Silver Pines Facebook group had gone from aggressive to unhinged. Karen had pinned a dramatic post. Our community is under attack by a wealthy land baron who wants to steal nature from the people. He has weaponized the legal system to silence our voices and erase our traditions. I don't know if it was David or his intern, but someone commented beneath it with a link to the parcel map, highlighting that Silver Pine's legal boundary ended 300 feet before the lake. The comment had more likes than the post. That evening, I got a knock on the door. I half expected another protester or a pitchfork mob. Instead, it was a woman named Jessica, a Silver Pines resident. She looked nervous. I just wanted to say, not all of us support what Karen's doing. My husband and I, we've been watching. It's wrong, and you're not the only one getting harassed. She handed me a printout. It was an internal HOA memo Karen had circulated 2 weeks earlier, titled Strategic Lakefront Reclamation Timeline. It included budget allocations, contractor timelines, and projected Phase 2 features, including lighting, signage, and the ODBA construction of a second dock. All without any board vote or resident referendum. I thanked her, and she left quickly, almost like she was afraid to be seen. The next day, David filed an emergency motion for a temporary injunction, demanding that HOA leadership cease all further use or promotion of the fishing lodge and issue a written retraction to members admitting the site was on private land. But before the hearing could even be scheduled, we got another surprise. The Department of Ecology showed up at my gate. 3 inspectors in field gear, clipboards in hand, accompanied by a county environmental officer. They spent 4 hours examining the shoreline, taking soil samples, and photographing the improvements. One of them asked if I had approved any of the work. Approved, I laughed. Lady, I was in Seattle. They snuck in like raccoons and built a shrine to entitlement. When they finished, one of them handed me a preliminary violation report. She looked grim. There's unauthorized hardscaping in a designated buffer zone. No permits, no environmental review. Whoever built this is in deep trouble. I already knew, but it felt good to hear someone else say it. By the end of the week, the silence from the Silver Pines board was more deafening than any of Karen's loudmouth press releases. For people who loved rules, signs, and passive-aggressive newsletters, they suddenly had nothing to say. That changed Monday morning when I got a call from an inspector with the Skagit County Environmental Review Commission. "We've concluded our initial review," she said. "Based on your submitted evidence and our own field inspection, we're issuing a formal citation to the Silver Pines Homeowners Association for violation of the state's riparian buffer protection ordinance." I couldn't help but smile. And what does that mean exactly? It means they constructed permanent structures within 100 feet of a protected freshwater body, without authorization, without a permit, and with environmental disruption, including tree removal and shoreline alteration. She continued reading off the citation: a $47,000 penalty, mandatory restoration of disturbed areas, and an order to remove all structures within 30 days or face daily compounding fines. I forwarded the citation straight to David and poured myself the most satisfying cup of black coffee I'd had all month. By noon, the HOA finally cracked. A mass email went out to all Silver Pines residents. The subject line was, "Urgent clarification regarding lakefront project." I opened it, expecting damage control. What I got was gaslighting on an Olympic level. Recent misunderstandings have arisen regarding the community fishing lodge project near the northern forest boundary. We acknowledge there were procedural oversights and that some construction may have occurred adjacent to a privately held parcel. We are reviewing options with legal counsel and urge residents to remain calm during this minor dispute. Minor dispute? They were being fined more than the cost of the actual building, and now the entire neighborhood knew it. But that wasn't the only fallout. The next day, Karen tried to backpedal. Hard. A second email arrived, this time from Karen personally. It was framed as an apology, though it read more like a threat wearing yoga pants. As HOA president, I accept responsibility for the administrative lapse in verifying property boundaries. However, I must stress that Mr. Devereaux's reactions have been aggressive and legalistic in nature, rather than cooperative. We hope to resolve this quietly. I forwarded that to David with the note. Translation: she's panicking. Then came the kicker. That evening, I got a knock at my gate. It wasn't a protester, it wasn't a cop. It was a plainclothes investigator from the county auditor's office. He introduced himself, flashed credentials, and got right to it. "We're opening a preliminary inquiry into Silver Pines HOA for potential financial misconduct. We have evidence that discretionary funds were used for off-book construction projects. Apparently, someone had tipped them off. Maybe it was the whistleblower from before. Or maybe one of the HOA board members had finally realized they weren't willing to go to jail for Karen's little lakeside empire. I let the investigator review the digital copies of every document I'd collected. He was especially interested in the Phase 2 memo that Jessica had given me, the one listing expansion plans, budget numbers, and anticipated PR optics. The moment he saw the phrase public perception management, he muttered, "Yep, that's going to look great on record." Then he asked me something that caught me off guard. "Would you be willing to testify if this escalates?" I nodded, under oath and with a slideshow. That night, I started seeing signs, literally, of the unraveling. Half the HOA protest placards were gone from the tree line. The angry Facebook posts slowed to a trickle. One HOA board member publicly resigned in a comment thread saying, "I was never informed that the lake project was built outside our property lines. I'm disgusted." Karen didn't post anything, not a word. Instead, the HOA's official Facebook page quietly changed its cover photo from the lodge to a generic pine tree logo. Their online calendar, previously full of lake-themed events and picnic planning sessions, was wiped clean. They were circling the wagons, but the circle was shrinking fast. 2 weeks later, I walked into the Skagit County Courthouse with a suit I hadn't worn since my father's funeral and a binder so thick it could stop a bullet. I wasn't just here to protect my land anymore. I was here to legally obliterate the notion that anyone, even a power-drunk HOA president, could bulldoze over property lines and expect to get away with it. The courtroom was packed. HOA members filled one side like they were at a town hall, most of them looking anywhere but at me. Karen sat at the front next to her legal team, two clean-cut attorneys from a Seattle firm that probably charged by the syllable. She looked pale under her makeup, her usual smug expression replaced with a tight, nervous smile that didn't reach her eyes. David opened strong. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is not about a fence dispute or a neighborly misunderstanding. This is about the illegal appropriation of private land, the construction of unauthorized structures, and the deliberate misuse of community funds by a homeowners association acting far outside its authority." The judge, a seasoned woman with zero patience for theatrics, nodded. "Proceed." Karen's team tried to spin it. They painted the lodge as a miscommunication, claimed that the HOA acted in good faith, and leaned heavily on the idea of historic community access. They even cited anecdotal reports that local residents had always used the lake. David waited, then dropped the hammer. He introduced Dean's GPS survey, the official riparian easement documents, the county assessor's parcel maps, and even a 1964 letter from the Department of Natural Resources acknowledging sole ownership of the lake by my grandfather. The judge raised her eyebrows at that one. Then came the photos of the trees that had been cut, the gravel dumped into a protected zone, and the inspector reports. Finally, he called our surprise witness, Jessica. She was nervous, but firm. She testified under oath that Karen had bypassed board votes, funneled HOA funds into the construction without consent, and forged internal memos to make it appear as if the project had unanimous approval. Then David submitted the Phase 2 memo with Karen's initials and signature. The judge asked to see it up close. "This is a planned expansion of a structure built outside your association's jurisdiction," she said, flipping the page. "On land you do not own." Karen's lead attorney tried to object, claimed the document was unauthenticated, but Jessica calmly confirmed she'd pulled it from the board's shared drive and had emailed it to herself the same day it was posted. Then came the final blow. The prosecutor from the county auditor's office, yes, the criminal division, asked to address the court. The judge allowed it. "Your Honor," he said, "we have opened a criminal inquiry into financial misconduct by the Silver Pines HOA president relating to the use of member dues for unauthorized private construction. We've reviewed the budget approvals, internal communications, and have received multiple whistleblower testimonies. Charges are forthcoming." Karen visibly flinched, and I didn't say a word. I just watched her squirm in her chair while her own community stared daggers into her back. The judge adjourned for the day to review the exhibits, but not before issuing a preliminary ruling. All HOA access to the lake was to be suspended immediately, the lodge was to be closed, and no further communication was to be made by the board to members regarding recreational rights until the case concluded. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. I didn't give them a statement. I just walked past the flashbulbs, ignoring the cameras, ignoring the murmurs. Inside, I felt calm. I hadn't won yet, but she'd already lost. The verdict came a week later. I was back in the courthouse. Same suit, same seat, same iron-faced judge. The gallery was noticeably thinner this time. Most of the Silver Pines crowd had either lost interest or didn't want to witness the public dismemberment of their HOA. Karen was present, of course, but the nervous smile was long gone. She looked like a ghost in expensive clothing, flanked by attorneys who now treated her like a liability rather than a client. The judge began without preamble. After reviewing all submitted evidence, testimony, and supplemental findings from regulatory agencies, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Grayson Devereaux, on all counts. You could hear a pin drop. She continued, "The court determines that the Silver Pines Homeowners Association trespassed on private land, constructed an unpermitted structure in violation of county zoning and environmental ordinances, and caused measurable ecological damage to a protected riparian area." Then came the numbers. The HOA is hereby ordered to pay damages in the amount of $285,000 to Mr. Devereaux, covering environmental remediation, legal costs, and property interference. Additionally, the HOA is fined $60,000 by the county for illegal construction and buffer zone violations. I watched Karen's attorneys flinch. The HOA shall also be responsible for the full removal and disposal of all lodge-related structures, to be completed within 30 days under county supervision. All costs will be borne by the defendant. Then the judge looked directly at Karen. As for the actions of Ms. Karen Laurel, this court refers her to the county prosecutor's office for criminal investigation into the forgery of property documents and misuse of community funds. Ms. Laurel is barred from holding any administrative or fiduciary role in any incorporated homeowners association for a period of no less than 10 years. Karen didn't even blink. She just sat there, staring straight ahead, dead quiet. Not a twitch, not a breath. The judge banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. It was over. Reporters outside were practically vibrating. They swarmed everyone who came through the door, but I kept walking, down the steps, out to my truck, and didn't stop until I was halfway out of town. I parked on the shoulder near a scenic overlook and just sat in silence, watching the treetops sway in the wind. When I got back home, there were already emails waiting. One was from the county's building enforcement office. They were coordinating with a demolition crew to dismantle the lodge by the end of the month. The second was from a Silver Pines resident group, 43 signatures on a letter of intent to file a class action suit against the HOA board for misappropriation of funds and failure to follow procedural bylaws. The third was from the sheriff's office. Karen had been formally arrested on charges of document fraud, misuse of HOA funds, and knowingly submitting false filings to county zoning authorities. Bail was denied. She was looking at up to 3 years if convicted. David called that night. I expected celebration. Instead, his voice was calm, measured. "This was a good result," he said. "But you should know, you just became the HOA devil's worst nightmare. I've already had 4 people call asking how you did it. They want to know how to fight back. You just gave them a roadmap." I didn't say much. I just sat on the porch, watching the last streaks of light settle over my lake. The wind had shifted slightly and the air smelled cleaner, lighter. That night, I slept with the windows open. For the first time in a month, it was quiet, truly quiet. They tore the lodge down in 5 days. The demo crew rolled in with county supervision and a full video team from the Department of Ecology, documenting every nail, every plank, every grill, dock post, and trash bin being yanked from the shoreline like tumors. By the end of the week, nothing remained but churned earth and a jagged scar in the soil where the patio had once sat. The grass would regrow. The trees, eventually. The message? That was permanent. I stood with arms crossed on my dock, watching them work. One of the county workers nodded toward me and said, "Hell of a thing to defend for." I nodded back. Hell of a thing indeed. Once the cleanup was done, I took no chances. I had a security contractor install automated steel gates at both access trails, outfitted with camera towers, facial recognition triggers, and motion-activated speakers that blasted a recorded warning at 70 decibels. "You are approaching private property. Trespassing will result in legal action." Then I commissioned a custom sign, 4 feet wide, laser-engraved aluminum mounted between 2 cedar posts at the base of the hill. Private lake. No public access. Trespassers will be sued to the fullest. Extent of the law. Beneath it, in smaller letters, "No, Karen, this still doesn't include you." It wasn't petty. It was preventive maintenance. Within a month, Silver Pines lost nearly half its membership. Residents bailed, furious over misused dues, shattered trust, and the looming class action lawsuit. Karen's name was stripped from every plaque, web page, and newsletter like she'd never existed. And then, out of nowhere, I got a call from a regional newspaper editor. Someone had seen court filings, pieced together the story, and wanted to do a feature, "The Man Who Took Down an HOA." I didn't want the attention, but I agreed to one thing. I sat down for a quiet interview with a local reporter named Alex. She was sharp, respectful, and asked the one question no one else had thought to. What would you have done if Karen had just knocked and asked? I thought about it. I probably would have said no. I said honestly, but I would have respected the hell out of her for having the decency to ask. The story went regional, then national. Apparently, people really love seeing HOA tyrants fall on their own swords. My inbox exploded with emails, strangers from all over the country sharing horror stories, asking for advice, thanking me for standing my ground. A retired couple from Arizona sent me a fruit basket. Someone from Florida mailed me a mug that said, HOA, Hell on America. But I didn't want fame. I wanted peace. So I went back to living my life. The lake was quiet again. The forest line slowly recovered. The eagles came back to nest in the northern fir. I rebuilt the old canoe rack near the shore, the way my grandfather had it. Sometimes on clear mornings, I'd just sit on the dock with a thermos and watch the water ripple in perfect silence. One afternoon, I spotted a small group walking the outer perimeter, 2 parents and a kid, maybe 10 years old. They stopped at the sign, read it quietly, then turned around and left without trying the gate. Good. It was working. And just as I started back toward the house, my phone buzzed. Text from David. Karen just took a plea. 1 year of probation, restitution, community service. No jail, but her public records wrecked. I didn't reply. Some endings don't need applause. They just need silence.